I'm Alex Dykes, and today on thetruthaboutcars.com we have gotten our hands on the 2015 Subaru Legacy. This particular model is the 2.5-liter four-cylinder model in premium trim. Before we go too far into this review, a key to understanding the Subaru Legacy really is understanding the pricing and the drivetrain, because the drivetrain under this hood is actually more closely related in terms of design to the Audi Quattro system you find in the A4, A6, and A8 than anything else in this particular segment. Under this hood, we find a 2.5-liter four-cylinder boxer engine. That means it's a horizontally opposed boxer engine, and a CVT, but it is not transversely mounted across the front. It's actually longitudinally mounted like you'd find in a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Very much like Audi's products with Quattro, the engine is entirely in front of the front axle, not behind the front axle like you find in a rear-wheel drive vehicle. That makes the drivetrain under this hood very, very different than every other entry in this particular segment. The other thing that's different is that for $21,745, this comes with an automatic transmission and that all-wheel drive system standard. And that means that this is the best value in terms of base midsize sedan entries, period. Although Volkswagen does advertise a lower price for their Passat, it's only a few $100s less, and it gets a manual transmission, and it doesn't have all-wheel drive. If you like your Subarus quirky, you may be a little bit upset by this front end. It's an awful lot more mainstream than we've seen out of Subaru in the past. We get a front end that's sort of a little bit Ford, a little bit Hyundai, and a little bit of Subaru all blended together. We get these attractive but definitely restrained headlamps. They are a combination reflector and projector design. Subaru decided to make this generation of the Legacy a little bit longer than in the past, although it is still shorter than a Camry or an Accord. The other thing you'll notice versus the Camry and Accord is that we have this very coupe-like profile. It's a little bit more similar to the Chrysler 200 and the Ford Fusion. That means that we do get less headroom in the back than you'll find in that Honda. The simple and elegant design continues out back with a relatively restrained rear end. We have sort of an integrated spoiler right here, a single exhaust tip on the driver's side, although we do have a cutout for the dual exhaust that you get with the 3.6-liter engine, and tail lamp modules that wrap from the body onto the rear. As I said, the engine under this hood is a boxer engine. It's a 2.5-liter four-cylinder boxer producing 175 horsepower and 174 pound-feet of torque. You can still get the 3.6-liter six-cylinder boxer engine producing 256 horsepower, but that will drop your fuel economy down to 29 miles per gallon on the highway from 36 in this particular engine, and it no longer means that you get the 5-speed automatic transmission. The bummer for enthusiasts out there is that the 5-speed automatic actually had a rear-wheel drive bias, something that a lot of people didn't realize about that Legacy. It actually sent about 55% of the power to the rear axle at all times. This particular vehicle isn't like that. Now we have a clutch pack type all-wheel drive system, and it defaults to sending a slight majority of the power to the front axle to help improve fuel economy. The interior of the previous generations of the Subaru Legacy lagged behind the competition, largely because of the Legacy's low starting price, but this generation has a significant improvement. So we now have a soft-touch injection molded dashboard, trim that looks very similar to what we find in other models. It's not quite as pretty as you'll find in some of those vehicles out there, but it's definitely better than we had before. And you will find a relatively large glove compartment. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, you can see that our particular model has the optional 7-inch LCD infotainment screen. This system is all new for Subaru, and it's a serious improvement on what they had in the past. We also have dual zone climate control in our model. And then below that, we have a small storage cubby where you will find 2 USB inputs, and these are high power USB ports, so you can use them to charge iPads. You'll also find a 12-volt power output and an auxiliary input right there. There's a decent amount of storage space in that cubby as well. Over on the driver's side, we have this 4-dial instrument cluster with a tachometer on the left, speedometer on the right, and a full-color LCD multifunction display in the center. Out on the road, the Legacy handles very well, but it has a little bit less to do with the center of gravity, as Subaru might tell you, as the chassis tuning. The chassis is tuned very nicely in this particular vehicle. We have handling in this particular generation that is just one notch below the Ford Fusion, the Chrysler 200, and the Mazda 6, and overall the chassis is also very well composed over bumpy roads. Now, in terms of acceleration, because this CVT's ratios are tuned towards fuel economy, the acceleration is a little bit lagging the competition. I ran from 0 to 60 in about 8.5 seconds in this 2.5-liter model, and the 3.6-liter model is not going to be as fast as the V6 competition. CVTs really help improve hill climbing performance as well as fuel economy. They aren't going to be quite as engaging as a traditional automatic, but Subaru does help try and limit some of the pain by giving these paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel. Now, these paddle shifters don't shift quite as rapidly as a traditional stepped automatic transmission, and this transmission will imitate shifts depending on your throttle position. So if you floor the car, it's going to try and imitate shifts, and if you're near a wide open throttle, it's going to imitate shifts as well. Now on the downside, that does have a slight impact on 0 to 60 acceleration, because in CVTs, the best acceleration is found when the engine can hang out there at its maximum power band. Of course, the trade-off for that is fuel economy, and this has been getting excellent fuel economy. I've been averaging 28 miles per gallon in mixed driving, and that's right about what you're going to get in the majority of the 4-cylinder CVT front-wheel drive competition, even though this is heavier and has an all-wheel drive system. Now, something like a Nissan Altima 4-cylinder is going to be about 500 pounds lighter than this, and it's going to get about 32 miles per gallon overall. The added weight of the all-wheel drive system does affect the handling, but it also affects the braking. Braking distances in this car were a little bit longer than the Camry or the Accord, but I think that the standard all-wheel drive system is a worthy trade-off when it comes to that. Now, if you get the 3.6-liter 6-cylinder engine, we no longer get a rear-wheel bias to that particular system. It does use this exact same all-wheel drive system. Now, this all-wheel drive system tries to send the majority of the power to the front axle under most circumstances to help improve fuel economy, but it can completely lock up that clutch pack if it needs to. Subaru's EyeSight system is an interesting option. We have our radar cruise control enabled right here, and it is following the vehicle in front of us at the preset distance. The system does work very well, and it is a full speed range system, which is a little bit rare in the mass market segment. This doesn't work quite as well as the Mercedes or the Volvo radar adaptive cruise control systems, but the fact that we can compare a car that starts at around $21,000 to a car that starts around $50,000 or $60,000 is really saying quite a lot. Now, there are some limitations with this system that you should know about. It's not going to work quite as well as those radar systems in certain inclement weather situations, because if you can't see out the window, then this system can't see out the window because it is an optical system. Like Volvo's city safety system or Acura's collision mitigating braking system, the Subaru will also apply the brakes to help mitigate an accident. It's not necessarily going to prevent it, but it's going to do its darndest to help reduce the impact speed and therefore lessen the injuries. When the road gets winding like we're on here, this does not handle like a Subaru WRX, but neither does it melt into a little puddle of jelly either. It actually handles incredibly well, and I think the biggest change that I would make in terms of handling would actually be a different tire selection. These tires do start to moan and groan a little bit in the corners, a little bit sooner than I would like, but that really just has to do with that tire selection for the OEM tires. Of course, tires are easy to change, but vehicle dynamics are not easy to change, and this chassis really is very well suited to this kind of handling. Although the suspension is a little bit on the softer side of this segment, it does hold its own. When it comes to cabin noise, I measured 73 decibels at 50 miles an hour, which does make this among the louder entries in this particular segment. Of course, you also have to keep in mind this is one of the least expensive entries in this segment, so I don't really consider that to be too much of a problem. The biggest thing you'll notice in this cabin really is the engine noise. It really comes into the cabin an awful lot more than the competition, although road noise is not that far off. Pricing is where the Legacy shines. For 2015, it starts at $21,745, again with all-wheel drive and the CVT. The next cheapest all-wheel drive vehicle in this segment is a Ford Fusion at $28,435, and the only other option besides those two is the new Chrysler 200 with the V6 at $29,370. If you want to start adding options to your Legacy, you really need to start at the $23,845 premium model, which is still a decent value in this segment, or the $26,845 limited model, which adds leather and allows you to have the option of things like EyeSight, the navigation system, etc. In part of Subaru's dedication to safety, they have made their EyeSight safety system, which also includes adaptive cruise control functionality, available even on the premium trim. The 4-cylinder Legacy is without a doubt one of the best values in this segment, especially in its base price or in midline trims. Now, if you want 6-cylinder power and all-wheel drive, honestly, I think there are better options out there. The Ford Fusion with the EcoBoost 2-liter turbocharged engine or Chrysler's 200 are more dynamic 6-cylinder options. They're also faster because this 6-cylinder doesn't have the same kind of power we get in those others. Of course, the biggest dynamic difference is going to be the CVT that you now find mated with the 6-cylinder engine in this. We get traditional automatics in the Chrysler and the Ford. If you're just looking for a good all-wheel drive value, look no further than the Subaru Legacy. If you're looking for more dynamic options in this segment, although Subaru has raised the bar with this Legacy, I would say the Mazda 6, the Fusion, and the Chrysler 200 in certain versions still top this particular model. Without a doubt, the Legacy really ought to be on your shopping list unless you're deliberately looking above around $28,000 or so. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes. This has been the 2015 Subaru Legacy. Go ahead and click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll see you next week.